All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Appreciate y'all coming on a Saturday night. It has been a busy week. There has been lots of news, lots of election related news in Michigan in particular, and also all around the country. There has been an audit going on in Arizona, and more recently, the big news today was an audit announced in Fulton County, Georgia, which I believe is the county of Atlanta. So that's happening now. There have been developments in the Antrim County case, including the attorney in that case having his office broken into. So there's been a lot going on there. I think what's the latest we've heard in that case is that we are waiting on a decision from the judge. And I've heard in the news that what they're waiting on is a decision whether or not to continue the case or not. My understanding was it was not about that, but about whether or not they were going to expand discovery to additional counties. So we've been mostly focusing on the legislative side of things. We've been working toward a citizen-initiated law, and the big thing that we've been working on this past week has been putting together sponsors to have a series of bills introduced in the state house that hit upon a number of the policy changes that were in our election reform plan that have not yet been introduced in the Senate or anywhere else. So we've got a big update on that. So anyway, all that to say that I have not been focused as closely as some others have on what's been going on in the Antrim County case. So if you want to chime in, feel free to. And by the way, anyone feel free to raise your hand if you like, or also just unmute yourself at this point. I think we have few enough people that we can have basically an open session. But obviously, if you've done these things before, you know that there can be an issue with feedback. So please do mute yourself if you're not planning to speak. And other than that, I guess let's get right into it. So first off, we had an interesting hearing in the House Elections Committee this past Tuesday. They took up several bills on election reform, although if you saw our email blast this past Tuesday, we had some concerns about them that they may not be exactly what they were being pitched as. And then there was also a very interesting comment by the liaison for the Secretary of State, Adam Reams is his name, and he made the bald declaration that the tabulators do not connect to the internet, something that is provably false and which may be proven in upcoming hearings. Now, before we go on, I'm getting a message from Katie saying I do not have any sound, no phone to dial in. Tell you what, I'm going to put in the chat right now. We actually do have a phone number to call. I didn't include in the email because I thought it wouldn't probably work well for people that were just calling in. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the phone number in the chat right now. So if you are having audio difficulties, you can call in with that number and access code there. So go ahead and do that if you want. It is now in the chat. Katie asks, can I connect from laptop which does not have a phone connection? Well, if it has an internet connection, you should be able to hear. I mean, I assume because you're talking to us, you're able to hear me. I don't know if your laptop has a microphone or not. So if you're having audio difficulties, please just go ahead and use the phone number and access code, which is in the chat. And again, if you guys are having any technical issues, feel free to chime in, unmute yourself, let me know if there's anything going on. And I guess we'll take it from there. So I wanted to play this clip right now. This is from the House hearing on the 4 bills. We laid out in an email that we sent out this past Tuesday. No, Monday it would have been, because Tuesday was the day of the hearing. They had these 4 bills. One of them was a bill from Representative Sarah Lightner, and this was a bill which I guess it didn't do quite the thing that we thought it was going to do. So let's let me go ahead and let me see if I can do this here. I've now got my screen should now be showing. There's a little video in the box here. Hold on, let me double check. I'm gonna go back to GoToMeeting. Sorry, I've gotten so used to YouTube. This is all tricky for me now. We should have the clip queued up here. So let's see what happens when we play it. This is House Bill 4837. And for those of you who aren't familiar with 4837, this is a bill that says that private organizations should not be allowed to connect to the qualified voter file. And in the email we sent out, we made a point that there's a very specific technical issue here with what's going on with this, because what the underlying story in all of this was that Rock the Vote was given an API to connect directly to the Secretary of State's website to recruit voters. And it was actually, in court briefings, it was described as giving them direct access to the qualified voter file. And we made the point that's not exactly what it did. It gave them a tool where they could register voters that would be pushed into the Department of State's system, and then they could put it into the qualified voter file. But anyway, here is Sarah Leitner, representative, I think it's Jackson County, maybe part of Eaton County, describing what this bill was.
Oh, hey, Adam, can you make it like so it's the whole screen, or is it just in your tab?
Let me see what I can do here. Hold on. Let's see.
Okay.
This might be tricky. Hold on. Let me see here. That's not going to work. Hold
I
on
changed
1 sec. Let me
mine
try
to
something
view
here.
who's talking.
Huh?
Can you hear me?
I do hear you. Yes.
I changed mine to view who's talking, and it only shows you and myself when I do that.
Right. So there's a couple of things going on here. And again, this is all internet craziness. We have GoToMeeting, which has me, and then I have a streaming software which is recording what I'm doing. That is my actual image that's showing up is coming from what's called a virtual webcam, where it's actually showing what would be in my streaming window. So what I've done now, which I think is working, is now you see the freeze frame of the video where my likeness is supposed to be. So I think that's working, right? Is that not the case? I don't know. It looks like it's working. So, all right, here we go. So this is Sarah Leitner explaining her bill, which, as I think most people probably understood it, was going to be prohibiting groups like Rock the Vote from being able to do what they did in the last election, which is having a direct connection to be able to register voters through the Secretary of State. So here we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. House Bill 4837 cleans up language in Michigan election law to make it clear that no third-party organization shall be allowed access
No sound.
to the qual.
There's no sound?
Can't hear anything, Adam.
All right, let's see what I can do here. Hold on. All right, hold on 1 sec. Boy. You know, I tell we got used to streaming here. Let's see. Let's try this. Microphone, broadcast, stream, mix. Here, let's see if this works.
Qualified voter file.
Is this coming through now?
As you all know.
No.
No? Okay. All right, let's see. Plan B.
It did the first time you played it when it had your image there also.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, we could hear her then. And then you stopped it and there's no sound now.
Okay, hold on. Microphone, broadcast, stream, mix.
Changes include removing language in regards to a.
There, was that coming out? Could you hear that
Nothing
then?
yet. No.
No. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see what I can do. Oh, wait. Oh, I have an idea. I have a thought. How about this?
Language in Michigan election law to make it clear that no third-party organization shall be allowed.
No, still no. Dang. All right. Let's see here.
Committee, and then we will open it to outside comments.
Hold on.
So with that, I will call up Representative Leitner on House Bill 4837. Welcome, Representative. Paper ballots, in my opinion. But also, so do we have an assurance, and what
Hold on,
would
guys,
be
I'm still
the
working on it
objection
here.
if this is what was presented as a security measure through the Bureau to say that it cannot be during the day? I understand about extenuating circumstances. There's generally provisions for that, or can be made, but this is something that was put
All
out
right,
by
I'm
the
thinking
Bureau.
about trying something
So,
crazy here and literally putting my phone up
suggesting
to
that
a headset. We have, actually, hold on. There may be another way to do this. I apologize, folks. In fact, maybe this is not the best way to do this. Maybe the better thing to do is just for me to explain what we're going to be hearing here. So, tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to play this clip, and I'm going to just repeat what Sarah Leitner says. It's only a short clip anyway, so there's no reason for us to go crazy about this. So, this is House Bill 4837 in the State House, and here is Representative Leitner explaining what this bill would do.
Language in Michigan election law to make it third-party organization.
Hold on. I gotta get back to the spot in the clip here. Here we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. House Bill 4837 cleans up language in Michigan election law to
She says the bill would clean up language in Michigan election law
make it clear that no third-party
to make it clear that no third-party
organization shall be allowed access to the qualified voter file,
the
QVF,
qualified voter file.
as you all know. The changes include removing language in regards to a designated voter registry,
Removing language in connection to a designated voter registry, something that does not exist anymore, by the way.
registration agency, It also adds language that expressly states that the Secretary of State and local clerk shall not allow
Explicitly adds language that the Secretary of State and local
organizations
clerk shall not allow
non-accredited
third-party
election
organizations
officials
direct
to
access to the qualified voter
QVF.
file.
Last year, the Secretary of State used an indicator in the QVF that
Last year, the Secretary of State included an indicator in the
showed
QVF
where registration came from.
where registration came from.
This gave the impression to the local clerks
This gave the impression to the
that
local
a third
clerks
party had direct access to
that
the
a third
QVF.
party had direct access to
Madam
the
Chair and
qualified
members
voter
of the
file.
committee, this is a simple bill to clean up confusion in election law, and I thank you
This
for
is
your
a simple
time
bill
and
to clean up
consideration
confusion
of
in the
House Bill
election law.
4837.
And I thank the committee
Thank
for
you,
their
Rep.
time.
Light.
That was it. That was what she said her bill does. Now, I'm sitting in the audience here thinking, we've got this testimony about what this bill does. And this bill, we thought, was supposed to be preventing private organizations like Rock the Vote from being able to push voters into the qualified voter file that other organizations did not have access to, that it was being used for partisan political benefit, that it was being used to add voters improperly that hadn't gone through the normal voter registration process, right? That's what we thought we were doing with. But no, Sarah Leitner says. This is just to clear up some confusion. That's what this is really all about. So that's from the bill's sponsor, folks. So what that bill was doing was not at all what we actually want a bill to do, which is to prevent a private political organization from being able to push voters in the first place. So that was the very beginning of a very awkward hearing that went kind of downhill from there. So the next thing, and I guess we're not going to be able to do this easily if I can't somehow make the audio pass through, but the next thing is the Secretary of State's guy, Adam Reams, comes up. And he first tries to say, well, we don't need to do anything about voter registration organizations because we don't know that we want to. These are organizations that don't exist anymore. These are from the civil rights era. These were probably not even put in by the bill sponsor. Legislative Council probably just removed it because it was a reference to something that no longer exists. So he's going on talking about that. And then we have the bill that came out about prohibiting the voting machines from being connected to the internet, except when they can be, which is a little crazy because if you're going to prohibit machines from being connected to the internet, it might be a good idea not to allow them to do it at all. Otherwise, you have all the same security problems you'd have in the first place. So Adam Reams from the Secretary of State's office goes on to say these machines don't connect to the internet. That is untrue. In fact, here is, this I can put on screen. Here's a video, or here's a picture rather, from my Detroit poll worker training. Notice please slide number 8. If you are transmitting results, connect the modem and select OK. That's exactly what we did in Detroit on election day, November 3rd. And to be clear, I was not a TCF poll worker. I was a poll worker at a polling place. And that's what we had. We had an external modem that they see at the end of the night. Plug that thing into your tabulator, and it'll transmit the results to the clerk's offices. So we did that. And we tried. First, it connected successfully to the Wayne County Clerk's office and transmitted the results over modem. And then it failed to connect to the City of Detroit's website, which we did over and over and over and over again. We attempted to, and it would not connect because it turns out you don't get a very good signal for the internet in a high school gym. But here we have now, several hearings ago, we had the Dominion representative claim these machines do not connect to the internet. Now we have Adam Reams from the Secretary of State's office on record claiming these machines don't connect to the internet. Connecting to the internet is exactly what they did. It was right in your face. So a couple of days later, Shane and I, we were going to the various House offices where we're looking to get our bills introduced. And we stopped by Chairman Boland's office and politely made the recommendation. Next time this guy from the SOS comes to a hearing, you should require he be sworn in every single day from now on. Because he lied to your committee. He lied point blank to you. He lied to your face. And I've heard rumors she's thinking about maybe running for Secretary of State herself. Seems like a good play to me. Start calling this stuff out. They came to your committee and they lied. They lied. Bald face right in front of you. So.
Yeah, I don't anticipate her doing that, unfortunately. She thus far, she's been extremely unbold in how she's moved forward to fight election fraud.
Well, we'll see. I don't know what they have to lose on this stuff, frankly. I mean, it kind of makes our side look good when you can show how they're lying in public on the record in a committee. This is testimony. I mean, granted, they're not sworn in, but I would say start making them do that. So anyway, we've had a lot of questions in the last week. I was on a call a couple nights ago with Tammy Carlone and a bunch of grassroots leaders, and they were asking about what exactly it is we're doing with these 7 bills in the House. So first, let me go through what exactly we're doing. Basically, there's 7 elements of our election reform plan, which, by the way, and I'll elaborate on this in a moment here, is moving closer and closer to actually being something that is going to be brought before the Board of State Canvassers and being a funded citizens-initiated law. But people are asking, why are you looking to introduce bills in the legislature on this rather than going after a citizen-initiated law? And there's a lot of reasons for this. First reason is that when we get the signatures, there's 2 paths forward. One is the legislature passes the citizen-initiated law into law, and it's not subject to the governor's veto. If they don't do that, it goes to the voters on the ballot in the next election. That would be the November 22 ballot, which even if we win would not take effect until the next election after that. So we want the legislature to actually pass this when it comes to their desks. And part of that is introducing the policies, having hearings on this, showing them that we're in the right on these issues. We talked about having the machines connected to the internet. We can prove that they're lying about them being connected to the internet. We can prove that this is something that people have been concerned about for 20 plus years now. People on both sides of the aisle have been concerned about these tabulators being connected to the internet. We've talked about some of the other elements we've got. One of the bills is requiring security features for ballots. We can prove that this is a problem. There was a very high-profile story in the New York Post last year where they had a whistleblower. He was actually a professional election criminal who admitted to all the things he would do to rig elections in New Jersey and New York. And he said, yeah, we would have people working at the post office that would intercept ballots. We had people working in nursing homes to intercept ballots. And sometimes we would literally just steam open the envelope and replace it with our own counterfeit ballots. So these are all discussions that we want to have in the legislature, and we can't have them if we don't have the bills that cover these policies. And the other reason is because if there is resistance in the party, we want to know it early. We don't want to find out after we collect 500,000 signatures that we've got a problem getting the votes. So we need to get lawmakers on a record on these issues. And the other thing is, if the state house and Senate actually pass these bills and then go to the governor's desk, number one, she might actually sign them. I mean, I don't think she's going to. Some people are more optimistic than me. But she might sign them, and then these are things we don't have to include in the proposal. But more likely, she'll veto them. Let's get her on record on that, right? We want her on record saying, I oppose voter ID, which the overwhelming majority of the public supports. I'm opposed to having security features for ballots, which cost almost nothing and could only be possibly used to facilitate fraud. Make her go on the record on these things. I wish the legislature would do more stuff like this. And this was a concern I've had for a long time working in the legislature, is a lot of lawmakers have an attitude of, I don't want my bill to be vetoed by the governor. No, let her veto it. Put her on the
Hey,
record.
Adam.
Hey.
Hey, it's John Clore. I'm sorry.
Hey,
I don't
John,
mean
go
to
ahead.
interrupt. But going back to your thing about, you said that maybe they should, Ann Bolin or Representative Bolin should have people or witnesses sworn in. Is that an able body that's able to swear people in? Do you know? Because I remember
it's not customary, and this came up in the I think it was either in the Senate hearing or maybe it was the House hearing when we had a lot of our people come in to testify on election fraud, and some of the Democrat members were demanding that they be sworn in. And I think it was in the House hearing, and the House chair said, "No, that's not our custom. We don't do that. We're not going to start doing it now."
that
So
was Matt,
it's not
Representative Matt Hall, I
customary,
think.
but in this case, where you have someone coming in who is not a credible witness, who has been caught red-handed lying to the committee, that to me seems like an appropriate time to say, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna have to swear you in now because you lied to us." And I would keep beating that drum.
Well, if anything, that we have him on the record lying. You know, if he's an elected official, we could also use that to hurt his future with running for any type of seat. That's for sure.
Well, maybe, but he's a bureaucrat. He's not an elected official. He works for the Secretary of State.
Okay.
He's
Right.
he's the legislative liaison, so he's someone that the Secretary of State hired to be the one who appears before the legislature and to mislead them and to misstate things that the Secretary of State has full knowledge about. So,
Gotcha. Thank you.
so anyway, so we've got these 7 bills coming up, and we're looking to introduce them in the House. We think we have 7 co-sponsors or 7 primary bill sponsors lined up, and we're going to hopefully have them introduced this coming Thursday. So we'll go through what each of those policies are, and they're all things that we have not yet seen in any other legislation in the House or the Senate. So, for example, in the Senate, they do have a bill on requiring ID of all voters. That's Senate Bill 285. That's Lana Tice's bill. Very good stuff. They have bills allowing video recording of polling places for the time that voters aren't there, like tabulation of absentee ballots. They have, what was the other one they had? Another one that was really good too. Well, anyway, here's the 7 bills that we're looking to put into the House right now. Bill number 1 is making it so that we can be sure that we have genuine bipartisan apportionment of poll workers. And to my knowledge, and correct me if anybody else has seen anything out there anywhere else in the country on this, I have not seen any other bill aside from the one that we developed on this issue. And the reason why we have this is because in Detroit, what they did was they went around the law requiring you have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans as poll workers. And the problem that we have in our state is that we don't have partisan voter registration, so there's no real meaningful enforcement of that. People can self-identify as members of either party. And what actually happened in Detroit was they concealed where the application process, where the website was, where you can apply online. They gave it out to their friends, and they brought in literally dozens, if not hundreds, of teenagers, of 16 and 17-year-olds to be poll book inspectors, to be quote unquote the Republicans. And that's a real problem. Of all the things we've talked about going wrong with the elections, remember the poll workers who are in the polling places are the people that ultimately control what happens there. Poll challengers can document evidence, they can challenge a process, they can contest something, but at the end of the day, if a poll worker demands something be done a certain way, there's no physically stopping them. And that's why the statute says you're supposed to have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, because people understood this is an adversarial process. We need to be able to have equal representation because the two parties check each other. So what our bill proposes, number 1, they have to have a clear, specific window of when you're hiring, between 90 and 40 days before the election. You have to have the application posted on your website. We're going to probably even add in that it has to be given a receipt of application to make sure they don't pull any funny games with that. And then of the people that apply, the parties actually get to have first say. And here's the list of people that we want you to hire. So people that Republicans know are actually Republicans are the ones that get first preference in being hired. Then after those people, registered voters, and then after that, anybody else, i.e. aliens, felons, and minors, which they had all of those working at the polls in Detroit. So that's the first one, is genuine bipartisan apportionment of poll workers. Second thing we've got is prohibiting the machines from being connected to the internet at all. In fact, they can't even be capable of being connected to the internet. It might take some finessing on that language to clarify, because if they can't have a USB port, which any external modem could have, you might have an issue there. But the machine should not have any internet connectivity whatsoever. And the amazing thing about this whole issue is the justification for it is so incredibly flimsy. It's that, well, it's convenient for people to have the results transmitted by the tabulators right to the clerk's office. I mean, that's just nuts. You could build an app for any poll worker to punch in those numbers on their phone. They have flashcards that take the results to the receiving boards. They have the paper tapes. And they're claiming that we need to make huge amounts of the general public concerned that we've got an internet connectivity problem, plus the actual real security concern of having them connected to the internet, just to be able to report the results after 8 p.m. It's absolutely untenable. So we are going to be putting in a bill that says, no, these machines should not be capable of being connected to the internet at all. There's no legitimate excuse for this. You can install software updates with flashcards. You can program a machine. It has a keypad. It has an LCD screen. You don't need to connect to the internet to program the machine. So that's the second thing. Third thing is security features for ballots, requiring, in our original draft, we said color inks and microprinting. In Tennessee, they have proof of concept now, which is they just passed a law requiring watermarks for all ballots. And that was amazingly supported by both parties. And it turned out the vendors said they could do that for only $105 per election commission. So it's not even expensive. And again, this goes back to the issue of being able to counterfeit absentee ballots because they're out in the field. And right now they're just black ink on plain paper. I think their serial numbers on the ballots on the stubs are in red, but that's it. It's not, they're easily forged. So that's one of those bills. Another thing, the rights of poll challengers. There was a hearing in the Senate the week before last. There was a hearing about a similar bill on this to enshrine the rights of poll challengers and say, look, poll challengers have the right to be able to observe the poll book. They have the right to get behind the table and look over someone's shoulder and all this stuff. And we actually kind of used that hearing to really bring to the attention that there's ongoing litigation about this, because they did walk all over us on this issue. This is a dear issue to me personally, because I was the source of these election officials saying, here's how you can abuse social distancing rules as a way to impede poll challengers. I crowdfunded a lawsuit, which we won, we thought, 6 days before the election on November 3rd. The Secretary of State settled out of court and said, you're right, we can't do this. And so she agreed to change her policy. Then she ignored the terms of the settlement, never told any election workers, you can't do that anymore. And of course they did. And we know all too painfully how that went. And what's happened since then is that they also went on to impede poll challengers at a recount that happened several weeks later in Eaton County. And as a result of that, the person that asked for the recount has now filed suit with the Secretary of State, demanding her money back for the recount because they did criminally impede her poll challengers. And if they get an admission from the SOS of wrongdoing, that might even trigger a contempt of court motion in the original case. So that's all very exciting. And also, by the way, one thing the Senate bill did was add in that poll challengers should be allowed to video record proceedings to be able to document what happens to them in the event that they are criminally impeded. One thing that we added to the bill is that in their trainings, every poll worker needs to be trained to know that impeding poll challengers is a felony in Michigan. That may be a strong deterrent. Also requiring they wear name tags at all times. Failing to wear a name tag is a misdemeanor. So if a poll challenger is criminally impeded, People know who it is. They know who did it. They can document the evidence. And so that's all in another of our bills. So let's see. We did poll workers, poll challengers, watermarks, voters, machine connected to the internet. Another one we have, allowing for canvassers to rescind certification if made under duress. And again, this goes to exactly what happened in Wayne County, where the two, if you guys don't know who the Board of Canvassers are, each county has 4 members on a Board of Canvassers, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. And in Wayne County, the 2 Republicans said, we don't want to certify this election. There's too much evidence of wrongdoing here. And they were bullied and browbeaten and threatened to the point where they eventually went along and certified the election results. And then not 24 hours later said, we want to rescind. We shouldn't have done this. We were pressured. We were threatened. We were bullied. We were browbeaten. And the Secretary of State gloated, sorry, too late. There's nothing you can do. And so 2 weeks later, the Board of State Canvassers certified the election. So we have a bill to say no. If you attest that your certification was made under duress, until the State Board of Canvassers certifies the results, you can rescind certification. So that's another one of the bills. Secondly, informational recounts. This was another big issue in Detroit. We had a hold on, I'm gonna turn off someone's webcam here. I don't think he wanted to be seen. In Detroit, most of their precincts were out of balance. In the primary, I think it was 70%. In the general, I think it was about 50%. Were out of balance. And what the rule is that if your precinct is out of balance by as much as one single vote, your precinct is unrecountable. And that makes it so that they can't ever determine what the actual contents were on the ballots in that ballot box. And there might be a good reason for that in some cases. If your ballot box seal is smashed and there's an extra 300 ballots in the box, you probably shouldn't recount those. But if your precinct is off by one ballot, and when you open up the box and there's 200 ballots missing in the box, then maybe something else is going on. So it's a very case-sensitive, specific thing. And what we're proposing is that if a precinct is out of balance, first of all, if a precinct is out of balance by only one vote, go ahead and recount it. That shouldn't be enough. That's almost always going to be human error. So don't worry about that. But if it's off by 2 or more, then the rule is you still count them. You still have a finding of facts, but only a court can decide to apply those recounted results. So the idea is that this is going to be fact specific, but it's important because if you're, I don't know, stuffing ballot boxes and you don't want people to be able to determine what you did, one of the important things you would do is prevent there from being a finding of evidence. So that's where we have a bill to allow, we call them informational recounts. So if a precinct is out of balance, it doesn't mean you just can't recount it at all. You recount it, but the results just don't automatically apply. They have to be applied by a court that decides whether or not, given all the facts in those circumstances, it would be appropriate to. So what else do we have here? I'm trying to think. I'm making sure I'm sure I'm forgetting something here. Let's see. Poll workers, poll challengers, watermarks. Hold on. Tell you what, give me 1 second here. I'll pull up our little list here. I knew I'd forget something. Okay. Last one, requiring that signature verification occurs in meetings that are available to challengers. Right now, the way it works, the most sensitive part of absentee ballot verification is the signature matching. That's the only thing that determines if the person that mailed in the ballot is actually the voter that asked for it. And we've heard lots of stories about very suspicious signatures. And of course, we all know the Secretary of State had an unlawful policy of just presumptively assuming every signature was valid. And the partisan bent of that is obvious when we know for a fact that huge numbers of Democrats, more than Republicans, were voting absentee. So we simply require that all absentee ballot signature verification takes place in meetings similar to absentee voter counting boards, where there's sufficient announcement of when these meetings take place, that they are open to poll challengers, that they're open to poll workers. And I think either that bill itself or some of the others that we have together with it also allow for the video recording of these meetings as well, which is important because it assures that there is transparency and accountability in the signature verification process. And actually, that was one of the Senate bills I forgot to mention earlier. There is a bill in the Senate to require a uniform signature verification standard, and I think it happened to also fall into one of our bills just because it was in the same section of the law that it was amending. So those are the 7. And we are optimistic we're going to have those bills introduced this Thursday. So when that happens, we are going to be putting out an announcement about it. Going to be urging everybody to contact their representatives and ask them to co-sponsor the bills. In fact, that'll probably be even Monday or Tuesday, because in the Michigan legislature, it's not like in Congress. In Congress, members can add their co-sponsorship to any bill at any time. In Michigan, they can only do that when either prior to the bill being introduced, or else there's a moment when, I think it's when it's brought to the floor for a vote, they're allowed to add their name as a co-sponsor, even though they didn't do anything for it. So the co-sponsor memos, the co-sponsorships have to happen before the bill is actually introduced. So that's going to be coming out this week, and we're going to really be asking people to contact their lawmakers, because we want them to see that there's support out there for this stuff. Because right now, and I can tell you from some of the conversations I've had with some of the more establishment people, they're thinking, no, voter ID is all we need. And no, there's a lot more than that. There's issues with the poll workers, there's issues with the poll challengers, there's issues with the ballots themselves, and there's issues with the tabulators. And we want to tackle all of those things. So it's going to be a big deal to make sure that people see that there's a real grassroots support out there for people to co-sponsor these things. So that's where all of that is right now. I'd love to let you know all the sponsors of the bills. I mean, I'll tell you a couple of them. Rep. Riley is absolutely going to be one of them. Representative Cara, who is the plaintiff in the suit against the Secretary of State, is going to be a sponsor of the bill on the rights of poll challengers. The others, I'm 99% sure they're all 100% on board, but I don't want to under-promise and over-deliver here, or over-promise and under-deliver here. So we're gonna hold off until it is official. Joyce asks, why do we need new laws when they will just break the law like they did? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, the laws that are on the books right now allowed for what has happened up to this point. And all the things we've just talked about are vulnerabilities that allowed them to get away with breaking the law because there was not the ability for us to document the evidence. When the Secretary of State says, we're going to have a signature check, there's basically no signature checks. Well, how do you get to the bottom of that? How are you able to have a finding of fact when there was no uniform signature check standard? Now, admittedly, some of the things that happened were illegal. Some of them might yet still be subject, and I mentioned earlier, some of these things litigation is still actually pending on. But it's not just as simple as saying, well, they break the law, so therefore the law doesn't matter. You want to make the law so that there's every possible preventative in the law, and to have people, and this is a shortcoming that we had in last November, was we did not have enough people who were, number one, familiar with the law. And, you know, I'm kind of an expert on this at this point. I didn't know a lot of the things less than a year ago that people needed to know. I didn't know that impeding poll challengers was a felony in Michigan until until our lawyers discovered that fact when they looked through the statute. So you want to be able to create remedies. You want to be able to establish that people can document evidence. So yes, there are issues with people breaking laws, and there's a process for that. And sometimes there are shortcomings in that process, and that can happen. And that does happen, but that doesn't mean you don't want to do anything about it. I mean, if you're going to say, well, if they're going to break the law anyway, then, well, if your vote counts for nothing and the elections are a total fraud, then I guess what's the point of any of this? But I would submit to you, ask yourself, who benefits by you believing that? Who benefits if you think your election, your vote doesn't matter at all, and there's nothing you can do to stop them? That's what the left would want you to think. So I think we got to keep fighting on this. And by the way, for all the failures that we had in courts last year, having this ongoing process is important to show that this issue is alive and people are not giving up, and we're not going to put up with it, and we are going to keep fighting on it, and we are going to keep pounding on those doors. So I could probably go on a longer rant, but I think I've said enough. But feel free in the chat to let me know if you think I didn't want to say, if I should say more. Sonia says, when someone fills out their voter registration, there's a checkbox asking if the applicant is a U.S. citizen. All a person has to do is leave the box blank. In Michigan, they tell election workers not to ask for proof of citizenship. Well, the election workers at the polling places on election day are not supposed to be checking for citizenship. That's supposed to happen at the point of registration. And I'm not sure if you're correct about whether or not the box is to check that you are a citizen, that you have to affirm it, or that there's a box to say, I am not a U.S. citizen. So it is in statute. They're supposed to be required to affirm that they are a U.S. citizen. And that's also, by the way, an issue that we've had with Rock the Vote that we will be talking about in the committee hearings coming up. Huge asks, signature checks are very difficult. Why not a thumbprint, which I believe is machine readable? I'm not opposed to that. However, some people will be. The notion of having to submit your biometrics to the government is something that certainly some libertarians have some concerns about. And certainly the other side would say it's going to be too cumbersome. It's going to be too difficult. I think it's impressive that we currently have a bill being put forward by Senate Republicans requiring there be ID for all ballots and requiring universal signature check standards, which is better than we had last time. So, and I think what it actually would require is the Secretary of State promulgate a universal signature check policy that will be open to the public for consideration. And they're going to say, well, here's why this is right and here's why this is wrong. But yeah, you're right. There's no easy answer to it, but put that on the Secretary of State. Make her come up with the policy and say, here's how you're going to verify signatures, that you can't just be presumptive. So again, I personally might not be opposed to requiring thumbprints, but I think you'd have what the legislature calls a heavy lift in doing something like that. And there'd be hard opposition to it. And there'd be opposition from members of the general public that don't want to have to submit a thumbprint to verify their identity. So, all right. So where we're at now, let's see. We talked about the hearings. We talked about the bills. I'm open to talk about some other topics here. And actually, I wanted to bring John on briefly, only because we've had this, there's been an issue brewing for the last couple of weeks here. And I didn't know if I wanted to speak out about it. Maybe I want to get some other folks' opinion on it. But I was thinking about talking to John about this because he sent me a link to it the other day. And also, he recently took a training from the same kind of school I came from, which has a important lecture about choosing battles. And that is, there's been a push brewing to call for the censure or resignation or firing of Eric Rowe in the Michigan Republican Party. And I guess there's some kind of rally about that happening in a few days. So, Jason Rowe, sorry. So, and maybe I shouldn't put John on the spot here on this, but I will say this is...
No, it's just my phone acts buggy and I have to turn everything off. But yeah, it's Get Rid of Roe, or Roe's Gotta Go is the event that's being held at the main GOP headquarters here in Lansing. Yeah, Michigan GOP. Let me pull that up real quick so I can get the specifics.
Well,
Melissa Corona is going to be there speaking. Over 500 delegates on signatures for petitions to have Roe silenced or censored. Yeah, you have to forgive me. I'm a very noob when it comes to the political realm, but trust me, I'm trying to put a grasp on it.
Well,
get a grasp.
And the reason I kind of regretted calling on you about this only because I knew you've heard some things. We had an interview last week about one of the things we mentioned in passing was there was a political leadership school in Muskegon that took place earlier today, and I know what these one of the things that these schools teach, which is a lesson I've taken to heart, is about choosing battles and deciding what's the things. We all have limited time, we all have limited talent, we all have limited money, and how do we put our efforts forward in the best possible way. And there's a million things calling out to us at the same time. There's vaccine passports, there's election integrity, there's opening our state up again, there's cynical racist theory being taught in public schools and even some private schools, there's defunding the police, there's all of these other issues.
Yes.
I guess what I was really getting at with just talking about that is the resources that people are putting into attacking an employee, not even the decision maker, really. I mean, I guess he's the executive director, so you think he is, but it's not that simple. And right now,
And let me speak. Can I speak on this for a second?
sure.
Yeah, the whole thing with the pressure campaign against Roe, if Roe, Roe was against Trump or whatever at some point, is this going to be the beginning of a total purge of anyone who is insufficiently loyal to Trump? Like, what's the end game with this battle? Because if let's say they dump Roe, what's that going to change in the grand scheme of things? Is that going to be the first domino to fall? I'm not exactly sure. I always think that the legislature is a good target, or a local politician's a better target than just going after some, employee who may have, put his foot in his mouth in a public situation. But other than that, I just don't see how, unless it's going to build into like a total purging of every anti-Trumper, I don't see where this would go, what this would really accomplish.
Yeah, my goal is to change public policy. My goal is to change our election law. My goal is to make it so that politicians never, ever again consider locking down our state. And
I think the goal with this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but I think the goal with this is to hold the people accountable who folded, who didn't have a backbone and stand up for the people, who didn't do their job, who went with the majority on the left or whatever. And so how are these people? I mean, I know he's not a really elected official, correct? Is this correct?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the major thing is, if I go out knocking on doors, I can go out knocking on doors and say, hey, sign my petition for election integrity, sign my petition to reopen our state, sign my petition to say our schools got to get open again. Sign my petition to have Eric Rowe Jason Rowe, whatever it is, Rowe. They're going to be like, why? What's the point? Who cares? And going back, folks, the GOP is the normal state. It is the normal state of them to be the weakest compared to the grassroots. That's the way things are. And right now they're open to supporting election integrity efforts. And do I want to scare them away from doing that? I mean, look, we are still early in this cycle yet. And if things start happening where, let me give you an example of something that might be different. Here's something that I actually think is interesting and something that is viable. A couple of years ago, Doug Collins ran for Senate in Georgia. He was primarying Kelly Loeffler, who was the appointed incumbent, because the way it worked in Georgia was she was filling a vacancy. And in Georgia, they don't just have a special election. The governor's allowed to make appointments to fill vacancies. So she was the appointed incumbent who had never been elected before. And Doug Collins was hardcore grade conservative member of the House of Representatives who was running for the Senate seat. And the National Republican Senatorial Committee spent donors' money attacking Doug Collins. Well, we know what the result of that was. The result was Loeffler got the nomination and got beat in the general election, and we lost the Senate seat and lost the majority in the Senate by 1 seat. So thanks, NRSC. You spent your donors' money attacking Republicans. Now, what's happening right now is that NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, is going to be spending money not on electing Republicans in the general, but defending Fred Upton and Peter Meyer in the primary. Because that's what they do. They always defend the incumbents. And the point I would make, because the rationale they always have for doing these kind of things is the incumbents are going to be able to get reelected more easily. If we don't reelect the incumbent, we might lose this seat. I'd make the strategic point. we might well lose those seats by the actions of those congressmen voting for the impeachment of Donald Trump for the most absolutely ridiculous, insane pretext conceivable. And more recently, even voting for the Democrats' partisan January 6th 9/11 commission type thing that they're doing. Open hostility to their constituents, open hostility to Republicans in general, and actually using their offices to play up the deceits of the radical left. So what you might do is get a letter going from your local Republican committee, letter to the NRCC. Back out of our primary, please. If Upton and Meyer are any good, they can win the primaries without your help. And if they can't, God help them. They're not going to be able to win the general.
Okay.
You know? And at least when you do that, you're not saying we want to kick this guy because he's an ever-Trumper because of things he said, not because of what he's done. You're saying, here's what your organization did. You took, well, here's the NRSC did. They took donors' money and they spent it attacking Republicans instead of trying to elect Republicans. And as a result, we lost a Senate seat. I mean, that's a way where you're at least putting the pressure on a national organization to realize that there is real heat out there for these incumbents in these districts, as well there should be. You know, and going back to what is the value of doing these things? Well,
Yeah,
the first question is,
you got to pick your battles. You got to pick your battles. And that was one thing that they taught us today. They have an exact scoring system for that, Red Fox 4.
Yep.
And you have to pick your battles, you know. I mean, I see your point, and this is just a wasted effort. It really is. I hear what you're saying.
I mean, is this something that's going to grow a local organization? Is it something that's going to help our friends and allies? Is it going to hurt our enemies and allies? I don't see how. I think it benefits our opposition, frankly. So now, if
one more point is that a lot of this was stirred up through a bunch of emails, supposedly like Rhino Ron emails in which Roe was targeted, and just wanted to mention no one ever went after Ron Weiser until he coalesced with Michonne and started trying to or seemingly working with the grassroots. So it's good news that there are people who are angry in the grassroots who want to fight, who want to push back against powerful people who are corrupt. That's great, and that's what we need to have moving forward. But we need to pick our battles strategically and focus our limited resources where we can have the most effect. And even if Roe gets the axe, it's really not going to change anything. And we need to focus on the legislature, I think, first and foremost. Adam's idea about the letter to NRSC is great. I know that I'm in the issues committee of state committee, and there's 4 of us who want to censure Upton and Meyer because just what our constituents have told us, that they demand this, that other states are doing similar things with other people who voted for impeachment. And
remember, Upton and Meyer actually attacked the Constitution. They didn't just make words; they made deeds. Now, if the state party starts putting their thumb on the scales for certain candidates in the primaries, that'd be one thing. But that hasn't happened, at least not yet. And as far as I can tell, I mean, Shane, you and I were both at that meeting where Ron Weiser got into all that trouble when someone said, "What are we going to do about Upton and Meyer?" And he says, "Look, there's a primary process." And then he made the joke about they can also be assassinated, and he got a lot of flack for that. But he didn't offer any defense of them. He didn't say, "Oh yeah, Upton and Meyer, well, they're great. They're allowed to have their opinions." No, he said nothing of the sort.
And another thing is that the on the issues committee, that's the kind of battle I think that people should be looking towards, because it's not like Upton and Meyer voted to impeach and then they turned a new leaf and they saw the error of their ways and now they're team players for Republican victory. No, now they're doubling down, and now they want Soviet style commission to have police state powers to snoop on patriots, conservatives, and Trump supporters. So they're
Yeah.
bad people. They're bad actors. They need to be punished. And I think people focusing more on Upton and Meyer, because these are two guys who, you got to know there's going to be a lot of never Trumper money, big never Trumper money behind them, because they sold out, just like there's big money behind Liz Cheney and Kitzinger and these other people. Their coffers are full because of what they've done to the country, betraying their people and their sacred honor. So what we need is to make sure that the party will rebuke these two people, these two bad actors, these two people working against Republican victory, and then we can hopefully move forward, and we can say to a straight face with our constituents that we are actually doing something good, and that we are putting a foot forward in the right direction, and that we are holding accountable these people who have backstabbed us all and denigrated the Constitution and violated their oath clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the point to any member, to any party official, what these guys have done is a serious liability. Hold on, Chuck, I'll be right with you. I see you're wanting to speak here.
I would appreciate it greatly. Help.
Hey, Chuck, hold on one second. Let me just to follow up on that point there. I mean, I would make the point to party officials any day of the week. These people are endangering their own seats. I mean, the 3rd congressional district was a swing district to start with. We don't know what redistricting is going to do to it, and how many Republican voters are going to stay home? So they're not going to vote for a guy who voted to stab President Trump in the back. I mean, that's a real liability right there. So I think there's a way to make that argument, but I think the way to do it is to make the tactical argument, make those points. But yeah, going after a staffer, I mean, as I say, we'll see where things go. But ultimately, you can also vote with your wallet. I mean, the Republican Party raises money. Rescue Michigan raises money. Every political organization under the sun raises money. And you vote with your wallet. You decide who's spending your money wisely. And, maybe it's us, maybe it's the Mackinac Center, maybe it's Campaign for Liberty, maybe it's any other organization under the sun. And we compete to earn your financial support to show that we're going to be spending the money wisely. And the Republican Party, frankly, is not all that good at demonstrating that, in my humble opinion. And that's their burden. And that's what you can aim to change. So anyway, I've been kind of ranting about that for a while now. It's come up, and I didn't really want to take it on, but I also didn't want to be silent on it, because a lot of people have been asking me, can you help us join in on this? And generally I say, normally I would say the target's always supposed to be the legislature or the governor, maybe in some cases, but going after bureaucrats, which is basically what he is. He's a bureaucrat for the party. It's just hard to make that work effectively. So anyway, I don't know. Do you guys want to add anything to that? And Chuck, I muted you because I wasn't even sure if you were actually talking to us at the time, but go ahead if you want to weigh in. I've unmuted you. Chuck, I can barely hear you at all. Okay, looks like he's
sounds like music.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, so a couple of other things I wanted to get to briefly. We have really kind of put grassroots related stuff on the back burner for these past few weeks because we've been so busy with legislative stuff, and I've been going to Lansing more than I care to, but that's how that goes sometimes. But again, folks, we're getting close to the point where we're going to actually have petitions for people to circulate. And now's the time to start thinking and planning about how you can leverage that to grow your local organization. And there are people all over the state who are as mad as we are about election integrity, who've seen the evidence that we have, who want to do something about it. And frankly, plenty of people who have an extra grind with the Democrats for every other reason too. And boy, Whitmer has given them a lot to chew on this week, hasn't she? With changing her story about why she was allowed to leave the state on private money, which was a gift, and she only changed it because she got caught red-handed. And then there was, what was the other big, there's another Whitmer scandal. Oh, Line 5, trying to shut down the pipeline at the same time as our country's going through a gas crisis. That was another brilliant move of hers. Although she's been gunning for Line 5 for her entire term of office, even though there's nothing wrong with the pipeline whatsoever.
If I can bring something up,
what
I
else?
don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
If I could bring something up,
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with election integrity or anything like that, but it's extremely alarming. And I don't know exactly what this is supposed to accomplish, but it's Michigan House Bill 4701. It has to do with DUI. Okay. I understand. We all understand, DUI, very dangerous thing, causes deaths, this, that, and everything.
Your
There
old
is a
friend Gary
system in
Howell.
place. Yeah, exactly. So this
For those
is,
of you who don't know,
this is
John
a very-
Clore runs usagainstmedia.com, which has posted a lot of very funny videos about what's been going on in Lansing, including going to a committee hearing as COVID man. But he also got in the face of Representative Gary Howell, who was the sponsor of those trash bills that went through the House a few weeks ago. So that's what that was in reference to.
dirty. Yeah, that was dirty bills. But this 4701, now, of course, as the law stands right now, if you are suspected of, driving under the influence, you have to submit to a roadside sobriety test, a breathalyzer. And if you refuse to those, then the state or the police officer can get a warrant to do a blood test to see if there's alcohol in it. But as a stand, I mean, that's the law now. But they're trying to add on to this to add any body fluid whatsoever.
Yeah.
Now that makes me wonder, what are they trying to accomplish here?
They're trying to add on swab tests. Is what they're trying to do. Swab test for marijuana.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So I can see that, but they didn't see that. Okay. So that makes sense. I wish you would have answered me before on that.
Oh, sorry, man.
I would have made an ass of myself on the group chat here, but that makes sense. Okay. And that is an intoxicant. You can't drive on that. That makes sense.
Well,
but what do you say to that?
And I'm no expert. I don't know whether or not. Sorry, I lost my train of thought going through the chat here because I'm just realizing there's been a lot of chat messages going back and forth here. And I'm trying to keep up with it.
It just seemed like it was very, the way they described any other body fluid. I'm thinking, what are you going to take? Brain fluid? You're going to do a spinal tap or something? I mean, what else do you need? Seems a little intrusive.
Yeah. And anyway, yeah. So now I remember what I was going to say was I have no idea whether or not marijuana stays in your saliva for a long period of time or not. I don't know the details of that, but anyway.
That's weird.
And I guess getting back to the grassroots portion of that, we have at rescuemichigan.com. In fact, let me bring this up on the site here. Hold on one sec. I want to show you guys for anyone that hasn't already seen it, because there are tons and tons and tons of bills going through the state, and we don't always have the resources to cover them all, as we've been talking about choosing battles here. But let me go ahead and share my screen here. Hold on. Okay. If you log in to rescuemichigan.com, we have user forums. And if you click on the link here, there is a whole section on state legislation. And again, I have not been participating as much as I would like to on this because I've been so busy with capital stuff lately, but we really want you guys to start networking so you're not all reinventing the wheel on every single bill that comes up. We've kind of broken them down by committee topics so that you can post on, here's this bill. It was introduced by so-and-so. It seems to do this. What do you guys think about that? And get the word going, because there will be lots of legislation coming up. I mean, there was, I think, 5 bills that came in recently on prohibiting vaccine passports. That actually, all of them look really good to me. So that was encouraging.
What is that under again, Adam?
Huh?
I'm sorry. What is that under? What was that under again?
Under rescuemichigan.com, if you log in, there is a user forum, and you don't need to create a paid account to get to it. If you just create a regular account, it's there for free. And you can connect to the user forum, and you can discuss state legislation there. And it's kind of broken down by topic, because we all have our favorite topics. Some people want to talk about vaccine stuff. Some people want to talk about abortion. Some people want to talk about gun rights. I'm kind of an all the above guy. I don't have time for everything. So it's just the way it goes. but there's lots of interesting legislation coming up, and it's good to know what all is happening in the different committees. So we'll probably be talking more about that in the coming days and weeks, because again, we've been so busy with Lansing stuff and getting our ducks in a row on the election reform proposal. But remember, we really emphasize that Rescue Michigan, I mean, our major issue right now is election integrity, but fundamentally we're a grassroots leadership organization. And the idea is that this website is to be a resource for you guys, that there is a forum for you to discuss bills in, that there's a calendar where you can post events in, that you can have your own blog and put comments on different people's posts, that there's the voter files that give you the tools to knock on doors in your precincts. I hope you all get those, because that will make it a lot easier to collect signatures and get a lot fewer doors slammed in your face when you're collecting signatures to know who the Republicans are. So,
Wow.
so
You
please
got a
check
lot
out
of stuff on here.
rescuemichigan.com. I know the site is expansive right now. There's a lot of content on it, and frankly, I wish there was even more, because I haven't been posting very many stories in the last couple of days. But please do check out the grassroots leadership tools, because there is a lot there. And one of the big things is having a place where people can network and discuss the different things. And I know there's other stuff going on too. There's I think Tammy's got a Microsoft Teams things going. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how those all go. We hope you guys give our site a try and see how well it works for you. So anyway, before I open it up for general discussion on anything else we want to talk about, because it is after 10 now, there was one story I did want to talk about this week that really caught my attention. And that was, this is from revolver.news. And it was a story about, the story was mask psychosis. New York Times confirms the liberal mask cult is here to stay. And here's the gist of it. All at once, the powers that be want COVID-19 to be finished. Mere weeks ago, the CDC wanted us to wear masks everywhere we went. Now the CDC says people with the vaccines no longer need to wear them, because they're starting to realize that the damage that they've done to the economy is really, really bad, and we don't want this to happen under Democrat rule, because people might vote for Republicans. So now the Biden administration wants the country reopened and things mostly, not entirely, but mostly back to normal, so they can reap the political dividends of undoing the calamitous lockdowns that they created in the first place. But they point out there's just one problem. The regime's propaganda was too effective, and millions of loyal cattle are too traumatized to go back to their own way of life. In a recent poll, 42% of registered voters and most Democrats said that, regardless of advice from the CDC or other health officials, everybody should still wear masks outdoors, no matter what. And this gets to an issue that I think we're going to see happening in a lot of different policy areas. It's a holdover from the hysteria created to attack Trump and to defeat him in the election, or get close enough to get away with knocking him off with a little bit of chicanery there in the election, which is the power of delusion. And where this comes from, and I've experienced this firsthand myself. I don't think I want to tell the whole story on the program tonight, but let's just say someone I knew personally did a very terrible thing, and rather than admit to it and own up to it, became increasingly convinced that these were things that God told her to say and God told her to do. And the behavior escalated from there higher and higher and higher and higher, until eventually just cut off all contact, and I'm not even sure what happened ever since then. When people have emotionally invested themselves in something, it becomes more and more and more and more difficult to get them out of it. And this is going to be a serious social problem that our country has for a long time. And the sooner we get them out of that, the sooner we can, get them back to voting like a sane person and realizing how the government has manipulated them and taken advantage of them. And I don't know if there's any one easy way to do that, but I think the one thing that does make the difference is, well, there's two things I think. The first thing is having having the healthy attitude being the social norm in that person's circle. And the reason why cults develop and why they're so powerful is that they have the self-sustaining cult system. And you always want to look for opportunities to peel people back from that, to get them involved. Like I had a friend, still have a friend, I guess, but I haven't seen her in a long time. But last year, she was literally kidnapped by liberal friends of hers, housemates, and was kept under lock and key basically in her home for the 3 or 4 months under the lockdowns. And one day she basically called me for help. I ended up just literally driving up to the UP with her and spending a few days in the wilderness where nobody wore masks and giving her a sense of, here's how normal people are like, and I think that, I think that helped a lot. Maybe not enough because she is still a Democrat. But you look for ways to peel someone like that back. She's a music lover. She loves live music, and they're never going to get to experience that again if these wackos are allowed to just keep destroying society and saying, oh, we can't have interactions anymore. And then there's also people who sometimes can be more easily brought back because they're not as invested. Young people, high school people whose childhoods have been taken away from them. These are the people that need to be shown how damaging and dangerous it is, what this social experiment has become. And then the last thing is, a lot of times one of the main things that helps break people's delusion is giving them a plausible exit. Giving them some way that they don't have to admit they were totally wrong. Oh, well, yeah, the CDC's changed now. And, why are the Democrats not following the science here? You were following the science, right? Well, now the science seems to be changing. Now the science is showing that it looks like it's more likely the virus was actually created in a lab in Wuhan, not a natural growth of the wet market. Now the science is showing that it's okay to not wear a mask because guess what? Let's check on what the coronavirus stats are. I look at that every now and then. According to the official government numbers, here's where we're at. Hold on, let me pull it up. Hold on. Still loading. Daily cases. Hold on, here we go. Yeah. Cases are dropping like a rock, almost to none. And these are government numbers. These aren't, we all know how they inflate statistics, but
I wonder how the flu numbers are compared to that.
They're not going to go up for a while. So why are you wearing a mask when you are vaccinated, which not everyone is, but these people often are?
It's science. Come on.
Yeah, science, right. So be thinking about this stuff, folks. I don't know if I had any kind of like one solid answer to all this, but remember where this is all driving at. What's the point of election integrity if we aren't actually going to win the election for something? The whole point of having a grassroots organization is being able to impact the policy to reclaim our liberty and in a big way, evict from office next November the people that took away our freedom. And these are the kind of things that you want to be thinking about because these things happen locally. They don't happen at a state level. All you on this call tonight, and thank you all for being here. You all are the most passionate people who are spending your Saturday night on here with me. The people that we got to reach are the ones who are not doing this kind of stuff. They're the ones who are waiting for someone to knock on their door, who haven't made a friend in the last year and a half because they've been home alone. So
I'd like to add one thing. I've been just doing events like crazy lately. It's mostly in the 11th district, but elsewhere too. And it seems like there are grassroots groups that are just popping up out of nowhere in churches, in localities, just, people, just random people who've never even thought of getting involved before are heeding the call. They're, seeing the country disintegrate and, go down faster than, they could have ever imagined. And they're ready and they're able and they need to be activated and put use in, civic action in a way that, maximizes their effectiveness. And we can be those guys. We can, I hate to use this cliched term, but we can be the change that we need And we just have to be the ones to get it moving. We have to be the ones that, educate these people, make sure they're not co-opted by the establishment, make sure that they don't, do things that are not effective and counterproductive. And, then we can actually take back our state and take back our country. It's not too late. The government is over, the stuff that they're doing is so insane, so evil, because they're desperate, because they're afraid that people are waking up, and they want to terrify us into submission, into compliance, into sitting on our hands and doing nothing. We cannot let them do that. We got to keep organizing, get involved through rescue, through other groups, and work from the ground up at the local level, and then it will resonate upward from there.
Hey Shane, in regarding all these local groups, I get inundated with emails from all these groups. They all have meetings, and I want to go to as many as possible, but it's hard keeping up. I talked to Tammy Carlone about it. She's putting a network together for election integrity people, and she said that she might do something where all these groups have like a master calendar. Each group can put on the calendar meeting date and maybe a link to a website. And if you have a calendar like that, it can help people schedule events. A lot of times there's 2 events occurring at the same time that I would like to go to. Do you know what I'm saying, Shane?
100%. And in the 11th district, we have the calendar there, and we try to make it so that there's no conflict of dates, but it's just going to happen. I mean, I guess it's a good thing that there's so much grassroots activity, that there's so many events going on so many dates. It's kind of a good problem to have. I would just say try to focus most of your resources on what's going on in your city, or what's going on at the localist of levels. Just try to, obviously there's a lot of fun meetings and stuff going on that you want to attend, that we all want to attend, but I would just say try to keep it as local as possible. That way, each of us can shore up our localities, and then at least we'll have, a redoubt of sorts against the tyranny that's coming from the higher levels.
We have to be talking to each other, All of us groups should somehow talk to each other, maybe have every quarter to have a major meeting for everybody, coordinate our efforts. So, if 10 groups are working on a single item, they'd get much further if they coordinated their efforts on that item than have 10 people doing it separately.
Mitch, to your point,
it's
there,
easier.
I mean, first of all,
easier,
right, this is
easier said than done. But that's what we're trying to do here with rescue.
Yeah, and right, there's lots of other groups that are doing the same kind of thing. We were at the Michigan Conservative Union's big conference, and these things happen naturally. It is frustrating when there are a million different groups going a million different ways at once. You have to decide, number one, how effective is any one group, and as Shane mentioned also, it's so important to be locally focused. It's one thing like there's a group that we're connecting with now called We the County, which is they have a very cool website actually. Now as it happens, they're from Huron County, which is a very rural county. I would say in most parts of Michigan, it should be We the Township or We the City. Beyond that, it's we have 10 million people in our state. And if we have 1 million people who are politically motivated, it's going to be, it's going to be a free-for-all, and it's going to be complicated. So the best we can do is, number one, at Rescue Michigan, try to keep our state level focus on the highest priority targets, and then mostly empower the local organizations. I mean, I would say, think about in your most local groups, are they focusing on the school board? Are they focusing on the city council, the town council, the county commission? Are they recruiting candidates? And then on the statewide stuff, pass messages along to the grassroots if you find out about something that's compelling. It was a group in Oakland County in Oakland Township in Oakland County that brought to my attention this Senate Bill 250 to create an early election, or no, that was the one to basically to put the lockdowns into law. and we ended up doing an email blast about it, and I think generated the heat to stop the bill in the House. So it was because a local group brought that to our attention that we were able to mobilize on that. And yeah, that's just the way it goes. So I would say, you know, it's obviously don't make yourself crazy going to meetings, but assess what meetings are the meetings you're getting the most out of. You know, typically I like for meetings to be not particularly long. Like this meeting right now is longer than I like to be. I think 1 hour is usually about as long as I like. I like to have some social interaction. Like we had the formula that we had in Oakland Township, which we've kind of tried to replicate elsewhere, is a half hour of people just saying for 1 minute who they are, where they're from, and where they're from, meaning which subdivision, because it was all within one township. And then a half hour of talking about local issues or current statewide events, you know, the legislature or whatever. So it's half hour of social time, half hour political time, and then that was it. And we just did that for once a week, and it worked out really well because it was a low maintenance kind of meeting. It wasn't like if you go for 3 hours in a night, that's your whole evening, and if you miss it, you're out of contact with the group for a whole month or 2 months if you miss a monthly meeting. So that's kind of the format. So I would say, yeah, you know, go to some of these meetings and decide for yourself who are and you'll usually be able to tell pretty quickly. There are some meetings that are really well run and some meetings that aren't so well run, and you know, decide which ones you like the best, and maybe encourage others to go to another meeting. You know, there's no one easy answer to this stuff, but the important thing is that people are meeting, and the important thing is growing numbers. That's what this is all going to be about. But yeah, the local emphasis is very important because politics is intensely geographical. You know, I'm not, we did a video this past week about this, what was going on in Oceana County. I'm not going to control what goes on in Oceana County. I don't live anywhere near Oceana County. People in Oceana County got to take care of that. I can work on what's going on in Washtenaw County. And that's about it. And in my township, I'm not sure I can do anything about what's going on in Chelsea. And we've got some things going on in another part of my county. And this is why having lots and lots of local organizations is critical. So anyway, I've been ranting for a long time now. So let's just open it up for any open discussion. If anyone has any questions about our bills, about what we've got coming up, what else is going on, happy to stay on and chat for a little bit. Otherwise, we can call it a night. Either way, anyone who has not yet spoken, feel free to. If you don't want to identify yourself, you can type in the chat, and I won't identify anybody by their last name.
I just want to say, forgive everybody a formal good night because I'm falling out. I've been up since really early this morning, and I drove all the way at Muskegon. But thank you so much for all the information that you gave tonight. I did, you know, get reacquainted with what I learned today with choose your battles, you know, choose your battles. I forgot it. I learned it today, but you kind of reminded me of that. Red Fox 4. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, we may do a more in-depth discussion on Red Fox 4 one of these days.
Yes, sir.
Adam?
Yeah.
Regarding election integrity, yeah, we need bills, but I continue to believe that the very best way to ensure election integrity is that you hold every person accountable for their wrongdoings in 2020. And that means, I know it's hard to do, but those people need to be prosecuted. Because if they're not prosecuted, we could have all the laws in the world. If nobody's going to obey them and nobody gets prosecuted, what good are they for?
Well, I don't disagree, but the only people that can bring these prosecutions are the parties involved. I am not an attorney. I was not at TCF. I was a poll worker for a regular polling place in Detroit. But yeah, I mean, we had the attorneys on a few weeks ago who are suing the Secretary of State for what happened in Eaton County, and which may kick back to what happened at TCF Center. But yeah, I mean, basically, there's 3 areas where we can do something for the next election, and maybe even for the past one. Public policy, that's my expertise. Litigation, which is not my expertise, but you have to have witnesses, plaintiffs, the aggrieved parties, and attorneys. And some people are doing that. And Matt DePerno is doing some of that, and others might yet have standing to bring some claims as well. I mean, I would suggest FOIA-ing the information of who the poll workers were for TCF and what their application said, if they were actually Republicans, or even if they only claimed they were Republicans, let alone if they really were. You know, you might be able to obtain body camera footage from what the police officers saw at TCF Center. Again, not my area of expertise, but others might be more well suited to doing that. And then the third thing is better training for every individual citizen for the next time around. And, you know, for those of you who have been involved in, and you've been to a party convention before where you were going up against the establishment and you got bowled over, you learned a lot that night. And I think it was the same thing with the election. I think a lot of people, this was the first election where they were working. And the Democrats were very well organized, very well coordinated, knew what they were doing, and our side, for the most part, didn't. And that's something that I think is going to be changing next time. Like I said, most people didn't know when poll workers were being expelled from polling places that those were criminal felonies being committed against them. And not everyone documented the evidence as well as they needed to. Who was the officer that did it? Who was the poll worker that did it? Who was a witness? Did you get anybody else to see what happened? And that's not easy to do when you're not prepared well in advance. And I think that's going to change a lot between now and the next election. But in the meantime, what we can focus on is changing policy. And so that's where we are. And we certainly salute everybody out there going with the litigation route. And I think probably starting next year will be the time to do more in terms of training for individual activists and for people to know how to become a poll worker, how to become a poll challenger, what behaviors to look out for. What's the process when they do something improper and you challenge it and they refuse to do it? What happens when you tell them to put it in the poll book and they don't? I mean, these are all things that... Sorry, go ahead.
You know, you need to be able to get law enforcement. If you're being thrown out and you're a poll challenger, you're a poll watcher, that is a felony. Yeah. And it's in progress at that moment. So I know in Troy, the police officers have gone around from precinct to precinct, and I assume that that's why they're making themselves available, among other things.
Yeah. Well,
but we were thrown out by police. We were thrown out. The police threw us out, and they were directed by the election officials. The police were manipulated.
That was Detroit, right? That was Detroit, though, right?
Yeah, and that's right. In Detroit, the police were manipulated by the election workers. I talked to an officer who headed a SWAT team. He was told to come down right now from the 3rd precinct to the TCF by an election official because the Republicans were smashing the windows to go into the TCF. He got down there and he said, "Excuse me, guys, but where are the broken windows?" And he had a 9-man SWAT, a heavily armed SWAT team. They ended up staying there, but he was shaking his head like, "What? This was a lie. We were brought down here on false pretenses." So Chris Thomas, one of the top guys there, had me thrown out. He called a police officer over, and he said, "Toss this guy out of here." And so it's the police are just doing what the election officials are telling them to do, which is, ridiculous that they are the only ones who have a say and we don't.
How about, has anybody actually thought to talk to Chief Craig?
Yeah,
he was there.
So now that you mention that, isn't that interesting? The Detroit chief of police might be running for governor pretty soon. So
right.
We'll see where that all goes.
What did he say?
The problem is Chief Craig was there. He came in with 20 cops when we started chanting "Stop the Count." And the reason we started chanting "Stop the Count" was because they were not letting us do challenging. So we thought, well, let's not do this counting when we can't even look to see what's going on. So it was a fair move. And Mark Foster, the head lawyer down there, said, we got to like fight back against this injustice. So people started chanting "Stop the Count." Then the Dems / election officials, which is pretty much interchangeable, they called in the police and Craig came in. They didn't arrest anybody at that moment, I don't think, but they sort of suppressed the all that stuff. The chanting lasted all of about 2 minutes, so it wasn't that big a deal.
Okay, well, I'm suggesting that maybe somebody sit down with Chief Craig and
Yeah,
find
I think
out.
that's a good idea.
You
He's a
know, I mean,
reasonable guy. Yeah.
I think so, and he's going to be running for governor, so I think that he needs to be on the record about what happened. Now, if his officers were told something by the election officials that wasn't true or spun things in a certain way, it's their job to know what the law is. So if poll challengers and poll watchers being thrown out, what does he have to say about it? I'm not an attorney, but I'm a paralegal and I play one on television. So
I think you're right, but the corruption is so high that even that little tiny little vignette about the policeman being told to smash or that they were smashing the windows, that story got parroted by none other than Jocelyn Benson, our Michigan Secretary of State, and it was carried on international, BBC and stuff. GOP challengers were smashing windows to TCF, a complete lie peddled by our Secretary of State based on this little initial tiny little piddly lie,
Well, between Benson and Nestle, that's some deep swamp material right there. There have been people that have followed the money behind them, and it's frightening. So that was a whole plan to put those people in those particular positions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, well, if Chief Craig was there in Detroit and people reached out to the police directly for aid to stop them from being criminally impeded, then I don't know, he might have some tough questions in front of him. But anyway, guys, all right, it is 10:30. It's getting pretty late. Thank you all for being on this call tonight. We've got, I think, some exciting news next week. We will keep you posted when the legislation is ready for introduction. Hopefully that will be Tuesday, so look for those emails. And then it should be very exciting when we move forward with getting those bills introduced, and the discussion will go on in the legislature from there. So thanks everybody for all you do for liberty. I am going to call it a stream, and I just realized, hold on, you know what? Okay, so it looks like I've been capturing only my webcam and not everybody else's. So your anonymity is protected. You are safe. I have only what was on my own screen, and I think it captured your voices, but not the text or the chats or your images or anything like that. So I think we're good. So, all right. Thanks again, everybody. Hopefully, and by the way, if you guys have any issues with the website, feel free to drop me a line. I'm going to probably spend the entire day tomorrow catching up on emails because I've gotten a lot these last few weeks and I haven't had enough time to catch up on them. So thanks everybody for all you're doing for liberty, and stay in touch and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a great night.